All right, E-Town. Scott Bramley here again with another edition of the Remote Learning Rundown. 2021 is the new year. This is the first episode of the new year, season 2, episode 9, and we're going to be talking with some of our classroom staff colleagues who wanted to share a little bit about what they've been doing during e-learning. So my guests during this episode are Marie-Edmond Parisian from the Special Ed Department, John Kennedy Farrell from the English Department, Blair Rose-Yoder from Math, Julie Brady from Math, and Frank Consiglio from Physical and Wellness Education. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we're going to start off with Marie-Edmond. All right, E-Town, I am back with a very special guest to share some of the things she's been working on and doing with students during e-learning, during our enhanced e-learning. So Marie-Edmond, thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join me.
Thank you. Good morning. So good to see you. Oh my gosh, I miss seeing faces. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Marie-Edmond. I'm a paraprofessional in the special education department. I know I've seen many of you in the hallway, but I'm reintroducing myself.
Well, Marie-Edmond is no stranger to the E-Town community. She is in tons of classrooms and at several events, and I certainly see her all the time back when we had the normalcy of being in the building together. So it's definitely a pleasure to interact with you this morning and just reconnect. So let's get right into it. Let's help our colleagues out. My goal with this is just to provide an opportunity to share. And so whatever you would like to share with your colleagues and family at E-Town, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about this year, how it's definitely been an unusual year for all of us. In the beginning it was super challenging. I thought, how am I going to do this? With a family at home, working from my kitchen table with, my son and my girls in their room. I really thought, like, how am I going to do this? I think I'm going to step away and just I can't do this. But then I remember in one of my learning strategies class connecting with the students and how they appreciated that I not only took time to ask them how they were doing. It wasn't about, oh, let me see your grades. We're focused on school. No, my intention is always you first, school second. Because if you're not together, then how are you going to function? And that I saw that connection we were building, and I knew I couldn't take time off. And it's been amazing. I mean, we connect whether through a common interest. I make sure I get to know the students first, see what's their interests, what they're going through, and then I share my experience to see that we're all in common. And many times my son's like running in the background, and I'm like, you see, there's no perfect situation. Because a lot of them will say, well, I can't unmute. I have my siblings or I have my babysitting. I said, I get it. And then my son's like climbing on my back, and I'm like, yeah, you see. And they'll laugh. And then I've had students just come on camera, and I'm like, there's just like this light lifted that I've I've made it comfortable for them. I mean, it hasn't been easy, but definitely the connection I feel was more important than academics, because if they're not content, if they're not, doing well, there's no way we could drill, chem phys in them.
Yeah. You talked about being vulnerable there, and I think that's such an important reminder. And we were talking right before we started recording, about just like how long have we even been doing this, and it's like, oh, it's just been so long. And I think those are the things that just remain consistent, right? Like, even though we've been doing this for so long, and even though the school year has, we're more than halfway through the school year, the level of connection that's needed, the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to focus on relationships, that doesn't change, right? It doesn't go away. And so it's a great reminder. I really appreciate that. And I love the I love the connectivity that you're talking about. And I'm just curious, do have any examples that you can share just about some of the ways that you've been able to make those connections? Like you said, asking questions and just kind of taking an interest, and you know, the example with the camera I think is great. And just is any other examples that you were thinking about, how you've been able to do that with your students this term?
Yeah, I mean, there are many examples, but one of them that's jumping out is there's a student who's, Latino, and he had to do an interview and ask his, someone in his household a question. And he said, I don't know how I'm going to do that. They don't speak English. And I said, I totally understand. I said, I'm from a Caribbean home. I'm from Haiti, and my mom only spoke French. And I said, this is what you're going to do. You will ask the questions in Spanish. They could answer in Spanish, but then you'll translate it in English for them. And he's like, oh. And then sure enough, the flip grid that he presented was, him asking in Spanish, they answered in Spanish, and then he just translated for us in English. So I'm like, you know, there's no wrong way, there's no right way. There's the way that works for you.
Yeah.
And also like through music, the students will share music, and I'm like, oh, I like this song. I've never heard of it. Who? And then they'll explain like, okay, this is what it means, like this is what it does for me, and I really, really see the connection. I'm like, okay. And then I told them, I said, you're teachers as well, because right now I just learned something from you. Another great example is just a couple of days ago, there's a student, we're going over his grades. I want to say he maybe had a 60 or something in a class. And I said, okay. I said, awesome. I see all your grades. Thank you for, filling out the form. I said, can you tell me a little bit about all your grades? And I pointed out like the 60 and something else. He's like, yeah. He's like, that's progress, Miss P, because that was at a 50 last week. Now it's at a 60. So he's like, let's look at that. And I was like, and I stopped and I said, you're so right. And I said, I'm going to stop right there. Great job on your progress. And I look forward to, to see, you know, the increase. And I also mentioned, I said, the reason I pointed out to you is, in case you miss an assignment or in case something happens, that way, if the grade is just a little bit higher, you have a bump if it drops, because if from a 60 it drops, then you drop to a fail. So I understood and I acknowledged what he was saying, but I also wanted to point out why I was saying, and it wasn't to say it's bad grade. I never say that's a bad grade to students. I always say, okay, there's room for growth and why we want to grow. So.
Yeah, it's such a such a powerful reminder of just like opening up the door to have that conversation in a way that a student feels comfortable to share. Like, hey,
Correct.
listen, this is where I'm at and I'm growing. I know about this, and that just invites continued relationship and continued support.
Exactly.
And like you're somebody who now that student will continue to come to. And be more vulnerable, potentially,
Right.
which,
Right. Yeah.
we can't help them if they don't trust us. And so, you have to build that rapport and trust with those little actions like that.
Exactly. I felt goosebumps like just saying it to you now.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. All right, E-Town, I am here with another special guest, one of our colleagues from the English department. And I'm going to ask him to introduce himself in a moment. But he's here to just share what he's doing, what he's learned, how he's tried to navigate e-learning and working with our students. And so, Mr. Kennedy Farrow, if you wanted to please introduce yourself and then let us know what you wanted to share.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Bramley. I appreciate that. I have been teaching English here at ETHS for 5 years. I guess I've been teaching for about 15 years. And so virtual learning definitely threw me for a loop because I've never done anything like this before. So I'd like to begin by saying that I do not have any wealth of knowledge about doing this in this online format or feel like it's been a complete success. But there was one thing that I started doing recently that was helpful to me. And if I could pass it on to other people and make it helpful for them too, then all the better. And that was having students set an engagement goal at the beginning of class. And so it's just a short-term goal. It's actually literally just for that online class period. And what I do is I have each of them either write it down, or some of my classes are on Zoom and some are on Google Meet because that's what they voted to do. So on Zoom, they can send me a private comment and tell me what it is. Right? On Google Meet, I have them write it down just for themselves. And the engagement goal can be as simple as I will speak once in class, or I will chime in 3 times in the chat, or I'll just turn my camera on and show that I'm listening to other.
You just froze there for a moment. Right when you mentioned cameras on and not having to have it, that's when you froze. So if you wanted to just reiterate that point you were making, that sometimes they're putting in the chat, so their goal might be to engage in the chat a couple of times, or their goal might be just to have their camera on for a moment in class. And that's kind of where you cut out. So
okay. And the goal can be as simple as just speaking up once in class. It can be as simple as putting a response like 2 or 3 times in the chat to something that was asked. Maybe they're going to commit to responding to the polls that I give in class. Maybe they're going to just turn their camera on for the discussion portion of class and just show that they're listening to their classmates, or give a thumbs up to their classmates when they say something. So the student gets to set the goal. And then if they don't achieve their goal, I encourage them to make it achievable the next time, or make it measurable and achievable the next time. And then I just ask them at the end of class as part of their exit ticket to let me know whether they achieved their goal or not. And it's just a simple yes or no. Some of my classes are on Zoom and some are on Google Meet because they chose to do it differently. And on Zoom, I can just have them send me a private comment, just yes or no. And on Google Meet, they can do it, either on Remind, because I have the Remind app, or they can just they can just say whether they achieved their goal or not. Most of them are okay with saying that publicly in the chat on Google Meet, right? And that, to me, even if the whole class doesn't reach I've never had the whole class reach their goal. The students have always been really straightforward with me about whether they reach their goal or not. And because it's like just self-monitored, it like immediately helped me see more student engagement. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's just me seeing their engagement more. Like, maybe like they have a way to like, oh, he doesn't know that I'm engaged in class. Like, this is a way for me to show that I am, and I'll do this then just for this class period. And because it's short term, I think it's very manageable for them, and it takes into account the fact that everyone's in a different space every day. Yeah,
absolutely. What you're talking about is so simple, but so complex, right? Like it's so simple to just have invite students to have that voice and agency, right? And they're learning to say, hey, I'm going to set this goal. It's short term. It's really easy. I either achieve it or if I don't, and it's really low risk. It's low stakes for me. But thinking about like setting a goal, thinking about your goal, reflecting on, was it a reasonable goal? Could I actually achieve it? Maybe I couldn't. How do I adjust? Those are so like important just skills. They're part of the social emotional learning skills that we are supposed to be focusing on in all of our classes. And I wanted to highlight that, for you, that, it's such a simple concept in as an idea, but it's so powerful. And I think it's so powerful for you to have build up a classroom community where kids feel comfortable just being honest about like, hey, yeah, I showed up this way today. Maybe I didn't do it. Maybe I didn't meet my goal. To be able to do that doesn't just happen, right? That's not happenstance. So I also want to just let you know, like there's a lot of power to the relationship you've built over the year, right? To be able to get to that place.
I wish I had done it earlier in the year, but I literally just thought of it a week and a half ago, and thought I was losing some engagement in some of my classes, and I was sort of like, well, I've given them talks, I've talked to them, I've invited them, I've said, hey, you can do this in many different ways. Maybe I need to just put the ball in their court and say, hey, we've talked about all these different ways to engage, like set a goal for yourself each day and see if you can do it just for that day. Yeah. And because, as I mentioned before, students will come in with very different things. My mom is having surgery today, so I just can't do this. I'm like, okay, great. Like your goal is just like, you can get through the class and you can watch. That's your goal, right? That's all that you may be able to do. And maybe you shouldn't even do that. Maybe you should log off, help your mom, and you can come back to this later. We'll have a one-on-one later. Like that could be your goal. And I feel like it's opened students up to the possibility that they could manage their own because I feel like oftentimes as a teacher, if I get into the place of saying, this is what engagement looks like, and this is what you need to do, that not only is just not true, it also puts students in such a defensive place that how could learning take place in that in that space? Like if you're feeling like I have to defend my engagement, like no, you set your own goal and you tell me whether you reached it or not.
Yeah, that's such a
And
powerful
I
reminder.
see the changes, you know.
Yeah, that's such a
Now,
powerful
I don't know how that'll
reminder,
carry
right?
on. I think, yeah, teachers, the biggest difference, I think, when I hear something like this or teachers say something like this is then, well, how are you going to incentivize it, right? And I feel like that's different for every teacher. I suppose that then falls on the teacher's like walk of life and how they do that. And the democratic classroom model that I try to use sometimes in my class, what I try to use as much as possible in my class. I sometimes, for some classes, it works to do like a group grade. If 80% of the students report that yes, then they all get 5 out of 5 participation or effective effort for that day. But some teachers don't feel comfortable doing that. Okay, then you can do it on an individual basis, or you can do like no point incentive at all. Just to like, hey, great job reaching your goal, or like sort of like a chart on a Google slide. Like look at us, like 90% of the students reach their goal. Or if you
Like,
feel comfortable
yes.
saying that you reached your goal, that's awesome. Look at us. Just look at us. Look at what we did in this. And I feel like they get a lot out of that as well. It's not about grades or points, but if you want to incentivize it, there's different ways that you could do it. So
yeah. That's great. I mean, those are great reminders, John. Just it's just the power of what you're talking about. And I think right now, a lot of people, as I've been talking to different teachers as we started second semester, there's definitely that feeling of like, hey, I'm losing some momentum. This is going on for a long time. And like, how do I, re-engage, and how do I re-inspire, and how do we get back to maybe some of the levels we had earlier on when this wasn't going on and on and on for months. So I think it's a great tip, and I'm glad it's working for you. And I really appreciate that you mentioned that it might not work for everybody, and every suggestion can't just be taken, and you have to really make it your own, and it has to be something that you're comfortable with as a teacher, and how your style is, and what your systems are, and incorporate the suggestions that we are given in a way that's authentic to you, which I think is super important. And that's what I took away from what you were saying at the end there. So I really do appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Scott, and I appreciate you doing these forums and this weekly thing. It definitely helps me to reconnect to what other colleagues are doing, to what students are saying in response to what we're trying to do, and that's important.
Yeah. All right, E-Town. I am joined today by Miss Rose from the math department. She's here to share with us some of the stuff that she's been doing in her classroom during remote learning, and I'm just so thankful for you taking the time out today, Blair, to join us and to share with your colleagues. So thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here. I'm a big fan. I watch every episode.
Woohoo! Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks for that. So Blair, this was an open invitation just to share anything you wanted to with your colleagues. And so, what would you like to share with everyone? All
right. Hi, everybody. First, I thought I'd mention that I've always thought that third quarter was the most challenging time of the year. I had a mentor when I started at ETHS years ago who always would say, this is the most challenging time of the year. And then at some point I realized that it was just any time that I mentioned I was struggling, he would say it was the most challenging time of the year. And I just needed to hear it sometimes. So I will say, I think this is a challenging time when winter is long and the daylight is short and we got a fresh start, but it's not the same as the fresh start at the beginning of the school year. But what I'm finding this quarter with the remote learning is I'm finding sort of a sense of relief of not starting completely from the beginning of the year. The routines are in place, and we were kind of able to jump into things at the start of the quarter and go with the flow. I wasn't teaching them how to upload work and where to go to find assignments and stuff. So that was kind of a nice relief to start the quarter.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of that, we take for granted sometimes. And like, you actually have to be pretty directly explicit about teaching some of those behaviors in the classroom and with how to interact with the technology that we have. So
Yeah, so I think that was a learning curve that some of us have gotten used to, the how to be explicit and how to teach those behaviors.
yeah.
But I guess some things, I don't know that I did anything interesting to start this semester. I think I'm more like trying to continue on some things that I put into place from first semesters. So one of those things, which is getting more challenging because we're coming up on the end of week 20 of school, is I've been doing theme Thursdays every week. So I come up with a theme like an animal theme where you can bring your animal to class, or you can dress up an animal print or something like that, or a stuffed animal, bring your favorite stuffed animal to class. Or we just had an 80s birthday party for me last week because it was my birthday. So I come up with some sort of theme, which sometimes involves dressing up in a silly costume. And sometimes it's just me, and sometimes it's me and 10 students. It's always, I co-teach with Brian Millington. He always dresses up for the theme with me. But sometimes it's not dressing up. I've got second grade going on in my condo while I'm teaching high school, and I take some notes from what's going on in second grade. And sometimes he asks a question to the class that all of the students have the opportunity to answer. So sometimes that's the theme, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's an opportunity where I really go one by one through every single student and give them the chance to unmute themselves and say something, or to say something in the chat, so that they're not just being quiet for 70 straight minutes. So I've gotten to hear some good things from some students that I wouldn't have otherwise heard from.
That's awesome. I know we're meeting today on a Wednesday. I don't know when everyone will view this, but sneak preview on Thursday's theme for this week. Do you have it figured out yet?
Yeah, this one was a request from a student. She wanted to know what music got people amped up, like what you want to play loud in your car to put you in a good mood. So I
Nice.
put a Google Doc together, and everybody's gonna, well, or whoever wants to is gonna share a song that gets them amped up, and then hopefully we'll all have a playlist that'll help us get through the long winter.
That's awesome. Like, just when you asking that, when I was in high school, all through like high school, college, like everything, I would always play Eye of the Tiger, Survivor.
That's your
in my car, and just like, like just get amped up and then go, like, even before job interviews, like that's always been my go-to. So
yeah, all right, I'll share that with the class if we need more inspiration.
For sure.
Another thing I do every day is I give a daily word puzzle. I'm a big game show fan, so that's actually something I've been doing for years. Is I'm aware, it's shocking to me, but I'm aware that not every student loves math quite as much as I do. So getting to come to the classroom and do something non-math related, I think, is a nice relief for some students. So there's a word puzzle from a game show called Chain Reaction on the Game Show Network that I'm a big fan of, and I give a daily word puzzle every day. So that's something that we do to start class in person and remote. That's one of the things that I actually kind of kept going with remote learning that happens in my real in-person classroom too.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
That's kind of how we start class every day. And then just some other things that I've been trying to do to keep students motivated is I realized in the spring that if I give the students a lot of feedback on their work, then they realize that I really am looking at it. So I noticed that, and I'm hoping now that that message has come through, maybe I can kind of step back a little bit with the amount of feedback, but I really try to make sure that I am looking closely at the work that they're submitting and giving them feedback on it. And I think that helps keep them motivated to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And then another thing is I use GoGuardian to make sure that the students are on track. And then in math, a lot of us are using a program called Desmos where we can see the students' work in real time. So then I'll message them in the chat or something if I'm seeing that they're not doing work. And I feel like the remote learning gives more of an opportunity to be a coach and have that sort of relationship instead of just having to come down on the kids. So, what can I do to help? Is everything okay? Instead of just, why aren't you paying attention? And I think that that's been helpful. It's, I get a lot of, oh, I'm sorry this happened, or oops, my bad. I was watching YouTube. I shouldn't have done that. I'll get back to work. So it's actually, I think it's helped to have, build some nice relationships with the students that I've just kind of, I think we have we don't have to react to each other in real time, since so much of our communication's in writing. So we really get to think about what we say to each other. And so I find that my reaction can always be, let me know what I can do to help. And that seems to, help create a nice relationship between me and the students.
Yeah, like everything you've talked about, Blair, has really just been at that core, has been about relationships and connectivity, and even like the daily word, like even the daily puzzle, or doing something, start the class off so you can be in community. It's such a super important reminder. And you said we're like 20 weeks in, and the need to continue to build community and connectivity in the classroom hasn't changed from day one. Like there's still that need, right?
Running out of ideas, but trying.
Right. But when have you found that the kids, like, like if you find something that hooks them or like they're into, it's kind of, you can ride that out for a while?
I asked for feedback, and a few of them said they liked the theme week. So then I feel like I have to keep it going. So I put the pressure on, oh no, now I need to come up with more themes.
Right.
I think we'll probably revisit some old ones at some point. But,
yeah.
I guess the one other thing I wanted to mention that I did, and I'm fortunate, I teach a couple of support classes in addition to my regular classes. So my course load is a little smaller than a lot of people's. So something that I did over Thanksgiving time, I found these postcards that said, I'm thankful that you're my student. And I sent a postcard to everybody. So I think I'm going to do the same thing for Valentine's Day. I found some teacher postcards. So it was funny. I didn't get a lot of messages from students about receiving them, but I could tell the difference just in the way none of the students had ever really thanked me or told me that they appreciated me for anything before then. And then all of a sudden I sent a postcard home, and a bunch of students all in the same week just wanted to mention to me that they appreciated me. So
that's awesome.
Like, I didn't say I got your postcard, but there was a difference. So I think it was positive enough that I wanted to try to do it again. And it was a good excuse also for me to think through each student and what I appreciated about them.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's so cool. And sometimes you never know in the moment how those things are received. You never know, 5 years from now, one of those students might call you and be like, Ms. Rose, remember when you sent that postcard, and just have that kind of connection.
There couldn't be any negative reaction to it. I figured it couldn't hurt. It was either going to be neutral or positive.
Right. So, there you go.
So that's just some things I'm trying to do. And there's still, a lot of struggles. I know that they're not always 100% engaged in what we're doing, but I'm pretty happy with how it's going so far, and feel like a lot of the students are learning a lot and trying their best. And so
yeah, that's an important reminder, is that not everything's going to be awesome every time, not every strategy is going to work, but you're doing your best for your students, and I think they appreciate that, right? They send you signals that they appreciate that in different ways. I'm sure.
I look for the signals. I take any that I can get.
Well, I'm going to be extremely explicit and just say thank you so much for joining us today and for doing this. I really appreciate everyone who's willing to take some time out. We're all very busy, and to just talk through and reflect on what you've been doing. I know I've heard from our colleagues that it helps. They enjoy seeing their colleagues. They don't get to interact as often as they normally would. They're not seeing you in the terrace like they normally would, during a free period. So I really do thank you, Blair, for coming on today and for sharing with your colleagues.
Yep, I've appreciated all the ideas that I've gotten from people who shared so far. So I wanted to come on and be part of it. So thanks for having me.
Okay. Hi, Scott.
All right, E-Town. I'm here with another guest who will introduce herself right now and share a little bit about what she's been doing during e-learning.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Brady. I kind of fly under the radar, but I've been teaching at ETH since 1993. I'm in the math department. So I tell my students, if it looks like I'm giving you the side eye, it's because my camera is in front of me. But my good friend Don Eddy said, you have got to get a second monitor. And here's my second monitor. So that's how I get to see you. Hi, Scott.
Hi. Good afternoon.
Hello. So I want to show you the thing that my students like the best, which helps. And I got a bunch of stuff. You tell me if we're going long. But this is what my students told me they liked the most in making us feel like we're a classroom. And I literally, at the beginning of this, couldn't sleep and lost hair and really was like anxious, and not even in a funny way, like, how am I going to give my students feedback when I can't see their papers? And we haven't provided our students with some of the technology that we could use to have them write on screens that I could see. So I'm like, that is my fundamental problem. And this is my thing my daughter made for me when she's 22 now, but this
I remember that being in your classroom.
that is literally like sort of my task. So I'm going to have Scott show you. And so Scott's going to get into his phone. So are you in your phone? Did you
Yep.
go to whiteboard.fi, Scott?
I'm there.
And there's a room code. So I upgraded. So it seems like all of the cool new technology, they give you some stuff for free, but you have to upgrade for money. So I have the upgraded version. So you can go my class code. So my class code is Ms. Brady, MSBRADY. So I have my own class code now. Don't come to my class, people that are watching just for fun. All right. And
All
I
right.
can do this with my whole class. Scott, did you see you popped up?
It popped right up.
Yeah, and so you can write. So I encourage my students to get a little stylus. And a lot of times in math, you have to write things. So you can write with your finger, Scott, or if you go to like the dollar store, you can get these cheap little styluses. So you don't need a fancy one, but say hi, write hi on your whiteboard. So sometimes students say hi or they find like something, and it's not showing up. So usually what happens is that I can see all my students' whiteboards and I can see in time what they added. But what he just added is that I can get on your screen, and this is the newest key he added, where I'm supposed to be able to join your session. But you see, he must be working on it. So
Yeah,
okay. So, but I got more stuff.
absolutely. But what you've been able to do though is you can see the students' work, right? They're working out a problem, just like when you were in your classroom.
Yeah. So I will push out the problems on a PDF like this, and I can store them in a library, and they can write on their screen. And actually it solved the fundamental problem of like, how do you write mathematics when I didn't hand you an iPad with a iPen, right? Or a Samsung with an S Pen, like, and you can't write on things for me to see. But I asked at the beginning, almost every kid has a phone, and you can do it on your Chromebook too, with a mouse and stuff. So you can do it on any device. And what happens is that it'll populate my entire, let me go back to let me talk on my whiteboard. It'll populate everybody in the class. It'll show up on a whiteboard and we can see all their work. And what's really nice is then students can talk about their work with other people. So like I can pop up one student's whiteboard, and my students told me in my one class that this is their favorite thing, that it makes them feel like they're part of a class again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for me, when I plan, what's nice is I can go to my, I can like make my whiteboards ahead of time now, since I upgraded, and I can go to my library and I can store my problems for the day and then upload them to class during the day.
Wow.
And I don't use it for everything, but I use it for things where I need to see what students are writing.
Absolutely.
And so, and there's other things too, like that are like this. So I know people use ClassKick, or I have a friend that's a CPS teacher. There's a new thing called whiteboard.chat. So there's all kinds of stuff that's equivalent, where it's like in real time on devices, students can write things and you can look at them.
That's wonderful.
And in a way that's different than the Google suite of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is awesome. I'm excited to check it out.
You have to come a different time where we can really do it.
Yeah.
It's working for tomorrow because I was going to use it in class.
Maybe he just needs to rest overnight, and then when he refreshes everything.
Yeah, his name is Christian. He's in Finland, and that the new thing he added. So sometimes it's a little glitchy when he goes through his beta testing. But this is the other thing. Let me open my chat.
Wonderful.
So here's
that's your setup.
Yeah, this is I'm going to send you okay, you got it. I don't know about you, but I'm always messing up the Google links. Students are always like, Miss Brady, we can't write on it, or Miss Brady, we can't see it. So there's me, that's my setup. So this is how I do it. There's like all the technology I gotta use. I liken myself. Have you seen The Wizard of Oz?
Yes.
I liken myself to one of the final scenes when Dorothy comes with the broom for her reward, and the wizard's behind the curtains, and they're going like this, because that's usually how I feel. So I'm writing on my tablet. There's my camera. I'm looking at my chat and my students' participant list and whoever wants to turn on their camera. And then I have a Chromebook because then I can check my email or if I need to send something out. So that's my set. Let's see what else. So I asked my students like what they liked. So you have the link to this too. So I put out content slides, which I've never done, where I publish the day's problems in a little different format than we do. And I try and put videos which is a little past what I used to do, and I just would push out kind of my PDF keys that the student liked. So I built on that. The Jamboard suite's a lot better. At the beginning, you couldn't put background pictures. So do you create a lot of documents, Scott? Or do you create a lot of materials to push out to people?
Yes. Yeah, mostly like meeting-based things, but yes.
Yeah, so like when you're doing problems, I can upload things as a background, which means students can't delete them, which is super helpful, or erase them. So
oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, they didn't originally have that at Jamboards, but it's interesting as we go through like how all the software is getting developed. I always use Desmos to like display things, but I know a lot of people in the math department use their activities now, and I can pass out interactive sketches now a lot easier. And I talked people into buying math type for my students, which is like how I write my math I've always done, and now that's an add-on for Classroom. So those are the things my students told me they loved the most.
Wonderful.
And so
how does math type work in Chrome? I know how it works in Word, but
it works just the same. You just click in. Can you see my screen? You click on this add-ons, and now I have math type, and it'll just let me type. And to me, it's a little more intuitive than how I would type in other things. Yeah. There's other software you can type in, but it's the most intuitive. It was super useful when students have to look like in classes for long lists of notation, because it's too hard to think about it versus one person could share their screen and type what they were thinking. And it worked pretty well when we were doing things like identities, which was good.
Wonderful. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then, so this is me. So I'm all in on trying new things. That's really I was thinking, what are the pluses for me about all this? I feel like we're learning together, which is kind of nice. I love slides. So that's my new favorite thing. So this is a slide that I can tailor. And I was always interested in doing like different levels of supports. I could have kids fold back papers or look for clues, but I can do all that interactively now. Like I can put out audio, or I can like delete boxes for them, which is kind of fun. Something I added I never thought of, like I ask students how they are, everything they turn in for me that they're writing stuff, which I had never done before. I love that we can color code stuff without going to the color printer. That's like so great. You can color code.
You have no worries about that. You can have as much color coding as you want.
Everything. I love that. I love that. And what I really love too is, do you know how to snip from your computer? Do you know like how to snip an image from the screen and clip it to your clipboard and then use it?
Yes.
So a lot of my students don't know that, but now like I showed them how to do that. And so sometimes if I'm using different platforms where they have to graph something or do something, they can create one sort of piece of evidence that have snips of all these things they've done and tie it together, which I really like, which we never could do before on paper.
Yeah. Do you want to show people? I mean, I think on a Chromebook, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You want to just talk people through that real quick?
So so if you Google snip, I'm on a Microsoft thing. So I have a little different snipping tool, but on a Chromebook, you do Control Shift, and then it's the little rectangle with the 3 bars, and you'll get like a little arrow, a little X, and you can put a little box. You just have to remember to save it to your clipboard.
Yeah.
And it's thank you, Dawn Eddy. She showed me how to do that like 15 years ago, and it works on all the machines. So, so I just thought I would show you kind of how it would look for my students.
Yeah.
This is like what I push out to my students maybe once a week. And so if we would have done the whiteboard, Scott, we would have followed up with this. And so I realized that now that we're online, so many of my students miss me talking, like instructing them out loud. So there's all kinds of cool programs where you can just press an audio. So my students like that, they can just press the audio of me telling them what to do, or they can read. I like that I can color code. So now they know like a yellow box means they can type in it. Look, if you need a little hint, you can delete the box and there's a little hint there. Isn't that nice? But you don't have to if you don't need the support.
And guess what? You didn't have to go through and cut a bunch of paper cards out and put them in baggies.
Now, I got to tell you though, it still takes a lot of time. Like there's a little bit of like grunt work to like figure out how to make this work. But now I got a little system, so I'm a little better. So that's sort of typically what we'll do. Like I can put like a little video if they didn't really know how to do something. So here I would ask them to do something on Desmos, and they know that if it's a gray box, they're going to do something someplace else and snip their work and then paste it there to give evidence that they did something. So this is like go to Desmos and graph. Then there's a little, then know what they love too? They want to check their answer. So here it says, after you do all your work, look, you can delete and you can see if your
Bam.
answers are right. Isn't that nice?
That's wonderful.
Yes. And
You know-
then this is the last thing I added, which, like you would have so many conversations with students just on the fly, and that doesn't happen as much anymore. So I probably give them a checkpoint once a week about, because they take a long time to write and to kind of look through, but I try and do this at the end once a week. So I just leave them a space where they can, it's got a little message from me like, how did it go? Are things going okay? And then they can tell me anything they want. So students share things about their week, or like if their sports opening up, or if something happened in their family, or what they're proud of. And then I can just write them a quick little note back. And so it's been a nice way to sort of figure out how to have a different way to share. And like anything, if you do something once, students don't buy in, but it's at the end of every checkpoint I do like this. So now they're like, okay. And I write them back every time something, like I'll underline something, oh, isn't that nice? And so
there's a routine and a rhythm, but also what's cool about this, I'm just taking away is I'm experiencing this for the first time myself as I'm hearing it, is everything's together, right? So for students who are like, oh, there's this thing over here and this thing over here and this thing over here. And when the Google Classroom gets a little, this is like, bam, everything's together for me.
So
for you.
If you've only been in my classroom once or twice, but I'm really secretly disorganized, but I overcompensate. So I can appreciate that lots of times students need a way for teachers to help them organize. And so I think that for me, I can tailor it. It looks a little like me and it feels a little friendlier. I can't hand you an orange or a sticker on your paper, but I can kind of make it feel like we're together while you work on this, which I think has been helpful for students.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Julie. This has been awesome.
Ready? All right. This is my usual send off to all my students. So most days I get them all to at least wave and say goodbye to me. So thanks for working hard, and I'll see you next time.
All right, ETHS, my next guest is from our PE, Wellness, and Driver's Education Department. I'm going to have him introduce himself and learn a little bit about what he's been doing during remote learning.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Mr. Consiglio, and as Mr. Bramley said, I teach wellness and physical education, specifically sports officiating class here at ETHS. I do have to say before I start, I miss everyone, and hopefully everybody is well.
Thanks, Mr. Consiglio. So what did you want to share with us? The opportunity here is just to share, and we can learn from each other. So what did you want to share with your colleagues?
Right. So one of the things that we talk about all the time is wellness checks, right? And how do we incorporate that into our daily lesson? For teachers, it's a challenge because you're teaching remotely and you have an idea of how you want that lesson to go. You're trying to be mindful of timing and how much a length there is to each lesson, and then pacing, right? Like being able to find a connection between the way you start your lesson and end your lesson. So for me, one of the things I've implemented across the board in both my sports officiating and wellness classes is to start each day the same way. I know from teaching, students really appreciate a routine. It's a big part of their success, their organization. I would say an organized student, it usually does really well, right? So we start the same way every day and we do a wellness check. And one of the things I have noticed with this wellness check is we've seen improvements in the students. And my primary focus with my wellness checks right now are the mornings. What do those mornings look like from a activity, from a nutritional, from a sleep, from a drinking water perspective? Because what the feedback that I got early in the year was that students were really having trouble getting started. And that makes sense with the difference between remote and in person. Think about it. A student wakes up, they get ready for school, maybe they grab something to eat, they walk, ride their bike, or drive to school. They're walking a big building throughout the day. And there's that activity level, get the brain moving, endorphins moving, and you're starting to get into learning mode. Well, we've taken that away. So one of the focuses is when we start class, I'll ask for a sleep number. And what they know by now is that sleep number is consecutive hours of sleep. And I'll pinpoint days. Like we'll look at weekends, we'll look at Mondays, we'll look at school days. And then the next follow-up question with that, which I think is really important, is how much time do you give from the time you wake up till the time you're supposed to be on a computer screen? And you'll see a wide range. You'll see 5 minutes to an hour and a half,
30
right?
seconds.
Yeah, exactly. And so we start talking about those habits. And then the follow-up question is, okay, before 10 a.m. each day, how many ounces of water do you drink? Before your first class, how many of you have a dedicated breakfast? Before your first class, or when you have to be on the computer, if it's a Monday, how many of you are implementing 5 to 10 minutes of activity? Because the connection, as you know, between activity and fuel, as far as nutrients and sleep and water and retention, the science is there. Yeah. And so what I've learned is to keep it open-ended. You don't want it to come across judgmental. Stay away from words like I would or you should. But what I've learned that it actually lends very well to a remote setting, because the most important piece of it is for them to see their peers' responses, right? And remote learning, I'm actually going to incorporate some of those things when we go back in person, for them to get instant feedback of what everyone is doing from a sleep number, consecutive hours of sleep, wake up time, nutritional perspective, to drinking water twice a week is essential. And what I'm starting to see as a teacher, right, is that without saying you should do this or you would be better if you took this path, I'm starting to see those numbers increase. Starting to see the sleep numbers increase, the amount of water students are drinking, the time they're giving, a lot more activity. I'll ask a question like, okay, today's Tuesday, we've had 2 school days. How much activity have you had Monday and Tuesday this week? And I'll say, have you, things like how many times have you eaten breakfast? So your answer is either 0, 1, or 2, right? And everything is open-ended. And the way you have to approach these wellness checks is food for thought, right? Like, let's get us thinking about that road so that you could think through of some of those morning habits. And I think the important piece of this is the feedback, right, that we're getting from our students, whether it's a survey or from our department heads or from talking to teachers, is self-motivation, self-organization, right, and getting into learning mode early in the morning. So I feel like if more teachers in all curriculums were able to connect wellness checks to their curriculum, which it's very easy to make a connection between food and sleep and things like water, right? Yeah. And connect that to your daily lessons, I feel like the appreciation would be there. I did an end of a class survey, and one of the questions in that survey is, what did you appreciate the most about the class? And 9 out of 10 people would respond the wellness checks. Wow. It shows you care. It shows that, you really think about what we're doing, right? Just by 5 or 6 simple questions. I generally spend 7 to 10 minutes at the beginning of each class, but that could be altered. I teach wellness. I teach physical education. If you're teaching math, for instance, and you have 3 to 4 minutes, that check-in is priceless for those kids to talk about those things in the morning.
Yeah. Just to give a little context, Frank, like you're doing 7 to 10 minutes in your block, but you also have 38, 40 students potentially? Yeah.
In the physical education classes, it's above 35 usually. Right. And then the regular ed class, like a wellness education, it's up to 27.
Yeah. So, again, just thinking about that for context, you have 35, 38 students, you can do it in 7 to 10 minutes. Somebody with 20 to 25 students, maybe it takes 3, 4, or 5 minutes.
Yeah. And the responses after the first 2 or 3 times doing it, you actually learn from it. What my wellness check looked like early in the semester is nothing like it looks like now. I learned from the answers and the responses. And as these responses are coming in, as a teacher, you're thinking, well, okay, that's a great idea, or I didn't think of that, or okay, that's what they're interpreting that question as. And then you just take a mental note, have follow-up questions. Less is more. Yeah. We don't want to feel like we're asking 7, 8, 9, 10 questions from a wellness perspective. It almost seems intrusive, right?
Right, like you're interrogating their habits or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the importance of the way you frame it, I think the importance of the open-ended questions. There never should be a right or a wrong, right? Like, even though we know students should be active or give an additional time between the time you wake up and the time you go to school, we don't want to come across as that, because then they take this negative attitude into the wellness checks, and you don't want to start your lesson each day with that sort of attitude. So I think just being open-ended, Catering the questions to them, pinpointing days has been huge for me. I learned that as I made some mistakes early, and I figured out, okay, why am I asking, well, this week or over the last 7 days? No, like think about how much we change within a 3 to 4 minute period, let alone a 7-day period. So I've learned I use the word pinpoint, and I'll say, hey, we're going to pinpoint on today. Let's look at Tuesday. And then I always have goals and whatnot as part of that wellness check. Okay, 2 non-negotiables by Friday that you absolutely, for your overall wellness, want to accomplish. And so it leads into other questions. It really gets the teacher, to understand where a student is at that day, which is hard, like even in person, right? You don't know how those students are going to walk into your class every day. You're standing at the door trying to read body language and read attitude and temperaments and where they're at. And it's really challenging when you're in a gym. It's a little easier in a classroom for my wellness classes. So this is just a way right off the bat where you can ask some questions, connect. And what I didn't realize was how much it came across as me caring about them. I had to realize that as I asked more questions throughout the semester.
Yeah. This is fantastic, Frank. Thank you so much for sharing this. I think it's relatable to everyone. And like you said, there's so many opportunities within this. And even if it's not specific to the wellness questions you're asking, there's this check-in structure that shows that that you see and you hear and you care about your students, that the students they're giving you that feedback, right? That this is a way that they're feeling seen and heard in your classroom. So I greatly appreciate it. I have one last question. I'm going to throw you a little bit of curveball. Just in your sports officiating class, did you review the film on the helmet-to-helmet targeting, blow to the head call that should have been called against the Chiefs in the Browns-Chiefs game?
Well, since I was rooting for the Chiefs, I took a one-sided viewpoint to that. And it is something when I get to the football unit, I'm always looking for more footage. But one thing I've learned about Cleveland fans is they're very passionate. Anybody from Ohio is very passionate about their sports. But unfortunately, they see everything one-sided. So I'm still trying to navigate through that.
Yeah, well, that's a good lesson to teach the kids when they're officiating.
That's true.
All right, well, thank you so much, Frank. I really appreciate your time.
Yep.